You ever have one of those neighbors that just makes your blood boil? The kind that doesn't understand boundaries, common courtesy, or basic human decency. Yeah, that's Karen. And trust me, she lives up to the name. It all started about 6 months ago when my neighborhood HOA decided to elect a new president. Enter Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the cul-de-sac, who took her position way too seriously. She had always been a busybody, poking her nose into everyone's business, but now she had power, and that made her unbearable. I kept to myself for the most part, following the HOA rules just enough to stay off her radar. But of course Karen had other plans. Before we dive in, comment where are you watching from. Give a like to this video and subscribe to give support to this channel. The problem started small. I'd come home from work and find her car parked in my driveway. At first I figured it was a mistake. Maybe she had company over and they had taken her usual spot. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt and knocked on her door. "Hey Karen. Your car's in my driveway. Do you mind moving it?" I said, keeping it polite. She gave me a condescending smile, the kind that made my skin crawl. "Oh, that's just temporary. I needed some extra space since I had a delivery coming. You don't mind, do you?" I did, in fact, mind. But I let it slide. One time isn't a big deal, right? Wrong. The next day, same thing. And the day after that. And the day after that. I confronted her again. "Karen, your car is in my driveway." Again. She rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just so much more convenient for me," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Besides, the HOA rules don't specifically say I can't park there." That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. She was doing it because she could. Because she thought no one would challenge her. Because she was Karen. I checked the HOA guidelines, and while it didn't explicitly mention private driveways, it was common sense. A neighbor shouldn't be using my driveway as their personal parking space. I sent an email to the HOA board, but surprise, surprise, Karen had already gotten to them. She had convinced them that because I had a bigger driveway, it was neighborly of me to let her use it. The response I got was laughable. "We encourage a spirit of community and sharing among neighbors," they wrote. "As long as it does not cause direct harm, we do not see an issue." Oh, I saw an issue. A big one. And if the HOA wasn't going to do anything about it, I was. The next time I came home and found her car in my driveway, I didn't knock. I didn't ask. I didn't wait. I called the tow company. Watching from my window, I grinned as the tow truck backed in, hooked up her car and hauled it away. It was almost too easy. Almost. 15 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I took my sweet time answering, already anticipating the meltdown waiting on my front porch. When I opened the door, Karen was standing there, arms crossed, face red, practically foaming at the mouth. "You had my car towed?" she shrieked. I leaned against the doorframe, pretending to be confused. "Oh, was that your car? I figured someone just abandoned it in my driveway." She was fuming. "You had no right. Do you know how expensive it is to get a car out of impound?" I shrugged. "Maybe next time, don't park in a spot that isn't yours." Karen stomped off, muttering threats about taking this to the board. I knew she would. And I also knew the board wouldn't do anything because technically I was within my rights. The next day I came home and, surprise, Karen's car was in my driveway again. This time she was standing beside it, arms crossed, smirking like she had won. "You tow it again and I'll have you fined for harassment," she warned. That's when I knew this wasn't just about convenience anymore. This was a game to her. She was testing me, seeing how far she could push before I broke. So I smiled. "All right, Karen." Then I walked inside, picked up my phone and called the tow company again. This time, I made sure to stand in my front yard, sipping my coffee, watching as the tow truck hooked up her car for the second time in 2 days. Karen came running out, screaming at the driver, at me, at the universe. "You're going to regret this," she yelled as the truck drove away with her car. I laughed. "We'll see about that." And that's when I heard it, a knock at my door, harder than before. When I opened it, 2 HOA board members stood there looking serious. "Can we talk?" one of them said, stepping forward. Karen stood behind them, arms crossed, smug as ever. And that's when I knew, this wasn't over. I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe, looking at the 2 board members standing in front of me. They both had that official expression, like they were about to hand down some serious ruling. Karen, of course, stood just behind them, her smirk widening like she had already won. "We've had some complaints," the taller of the 2 said, clearing his throat. "It's been brought to our attention that you've had a vehicle towed from your driveway, twice." I raised an eyebrow. "That's right. Because it was parked in my driveway. Illegally." Karen scoffed. "It wasn't illegal. The HOA encourages community parking. And I already explained to you why I needed the extra space. I sighed. And I explained to you why I didn't care. My driveway isn't community parking. The second board member, a woman with short gray hair, looked down at her clipboard. Technically, the HOA does not have specific rules regarding driveway usage beyond not blocking public access. However, given that we like to promote a spirit of cooperation. I cut her off. Karen is not cooperating. She's taking advantage. You wouldn't be standing here if I had parked in her driveway, would you? Silence. Karen crossed her arms. This isn't about driveways. It's about harassment. You're targeting me and I feel unsafe in my own neighborhood. I actually laughed at that. You feel unsafe? You've been trespassing on my property for weeks. I asked you nicely to stop. You didn't? So I handled it. The taller board member cleared his throat again. Look, we just want to resolve this peacefully. Can we agree to some kind of arrangement? I shook my head. No. The arrangement is simple. Karen doesn't park in my driveway and I won't have her car towed. Karen's smirk returned. Then I guess I'll just have to bring this up at the next board meeting. We'll see how the community feels about your aggressive behavior. I narrowed my eyes. You do that. She turned on her heel and walked away, and I knew she wasn't giving up. But neither was I. The battle had just begun. I barely had time to process what had just happened when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, half expecting another HOA threat. Instead, a deep voice spoke, calm but firm. You think this is over? Think again. My blood ran cold. Who is this? The call disconnected. My mind raced. Had the HOA finally snapped? Or was it Karen, furious that her car had been towed again? Either way, I was done playing defense. Determined to get ahead of whatever they were planning, I grabbed my laptop and started digging into the HOA's financials. I had a contact at City Hall, an old friend who owed me a favor. Within an hour, I had access to documents that made my stomach drop. The HOA's funds were being siphoned into a mysterious account under the name Community Development Project. But there were no projects, just a money trail leading straight to none other than the HOA president himself, Mr. Peterson. It was all starting to make sense. The excessive fines, the sudden rule changes, the relentless targeting of homeowners, it was all a smokescreen to keep everyone distracted while he lined his pockets. Just as I was about to forward the evidence to my lawyer, my security cameras alerted me to movement outside. I switched to the live feed and my jaw clenched. Two men in dark clothing were standing by my car. One had a crowbar. The other was scanning my windows as if checking if I was home. My heart pounded. This was no longer just an HOA dispute. I hit record on my cameras and dialed the police. Yes, I need officers dispatched immediately. I think someone is trying to break into my house. I watched as one of the men reached for my car handle. Then, as if sensing he was being watched, he turned and locked eyes with the camera. He grinned. And then he did something I never expected. He held up a set of car keys. My car keys. My stomach dropped as realization hit. They had been inside my house. And that meant I wasn't safe at all. The sirens blared in the distance, but the two men didn't flinch. Instead, they turned and walked away, vanishing into the night as if they had never been there. When the cops arrived, I showed them the footage, but their response made my blood boil. There's not much we can do unless they actually commit a crime, one officer said with a shrug. Are you kidding me? They were trying to break in. No forced entry. No stolen property. I clenched my fist. They had my car keys. That means they were inside my house at some point. Isn't that enough? The officer sighed. Look, I get it. But without proof of an actual break-in, all we can do is file a report. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. What about the HOA president? If I have proof of fraud, can you investigate him? The officer exchanged a look with his partner. That's not really our jurisdiction. But if you take it to the city, they might step in. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was something. After the cops left, I barricaded my doors and triple-checked my locks. Sleep was out of the question. I spent the night poring through the HOA's records, looking for anything that could get Peterson taken down for good. By morning I had a plan. I was going to expose him. And this time he wouldn't see it coming. But just as I was about to put my plan into motion, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. A photo. Of my house. Taken from outside. And underneath it, a message. You don't know who you're messing with. The message sent a chill down my spine. Someone was watching my house and they wanted me to know it. My fingers tightened around my phone as I stared at the photo. It was taken from the sidewalk, just outside my property line. The angle was perfect, like they had all the time in the world to snap the picture. My mind raced. Who sent this? Karen? Peterson? Or someone else entirely? The men outside my house last night, were they connected to this? I wasn't waiting to find out. I immediately checked my security cameras, scrolling through the footage. The timestamp on the message showed it was sent just 5 minutes ago. I rewound the footage and saw a shadowy figure standing by the mailbox. They never stepped onto my property, just stood there, took the picture and walked off. Coward. I wasn't about to let this slide. If they thought intimidation would scare me into backing down, they were dead wrong. I copied the photo along with the camera footage and sent it straight to my lawyer. Then I forwarded it to the city's fraud investigation unit along with all the evidence I had on Peterson's corruption. I had no idea what would come of it, but I wasn't going to sit back and let them push me around. Just as I was finishing up, another knock echoed through my house. I checked the peephole, half expecting another surprise visit from the HOA. But instead I found someone I didn't recognize, an older man, dressed in a sharp suit. His expression was unreadable, but something about him made my stomach turn. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" His eyes flicked up to meet mine, cold and calculating. "You've been asking a lot of questions." I tensed. "And you are." "You don't need to know my name," he said smoothly. "What you do need to know is that people who dig too deep sometimes find themselves in difficult situations." I held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "Are you threatening me?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a friendly warning. Maybe it's best if you let this whole HOA thing go." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the door. "Or what?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head like I was some naive kid who didn't understand the game I was playing. "Enjoy your evening." Then he turned and walked away, completely at ease, like he hadn't just delivered a veiled threat on my own doorstep. I watched him leave, my blood boiling. This wasn't just about HOA fines or Karen's entitled nonsense anymore. This was bigger. There was money involved, power plays happening behind the scenes. And I had just stepped into something far worse than I expected. I locked the door and double-checked my security system. Every camera was working, every motion sensor armed. If they wanted to scare me off, they'd have to do a lot better than that. I spent the rest of the night preparing. If they thought I was going to roll over, they were about to be very disappointed. The next morning, I woke up to another surprise, one that made my stomach drop. An eviction notice. Plastered to my front door in bright red letters. Notice of HOA violation, final warning. Violation? What violation? I ripped the paper off and scanned it. According to the notice, I had failed to comply with community guidelines, engaged in aggressive behavior, and created an unsafe living environment for neighbors. And at the bottom, the kicker: failure to vacate within 30 days will result in legal action. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. They really thought this would work? That they could evict me from my own home? They had no clue who they were messing with. Because what they didn't know, what they had failed to check, was that I wasn't just a homeowner in this neighborhood. I owned the entire neighborhood. My grip tightened around my phone as I stared at the message. "You don't know who you're messing with." The words lingered in my mind like a warning, but all they did was fuel my determination. Whoever sent this thought they could intimidate me. They were wrong. I immediately checked my security cameras, scanning every inch of my property. The footage showed a shadowy figure lingering outside my house just minutes before the message came through. The person had kept their face hidden, but one thing was clear: they wanted me to know they were watching. This was no longer about a driveway dispute. This was about control, power, and fear. But they underestimated me. Instead of cowering, I did the opposite. I packed up all my files, every piece of evidence I had gathered on the HOA president and his fraudulent activities, and headed straight to City Hall. It was time to put an end to this once and for all. As I walked into the city offices, I expected resistance. Bureaucracy had a way of dragging its feet, especially when the people involved had money and influence. But I came prepared. I met with a city investigator, a no-nonsense woman who took one look at the documents and immediately saw the problem. "This is bad," she muttered, flipping through the records. "If what you're saying is true, Peterson is looking at some serious charges." I leaned forward. "It's true. And if you dig deeper, I guarantee you'll find more." She nodded, already making notes. "I'll start an official inquiry. But be careful. If he's willing to go this far to cover his tracks, he won't go down without a fight." I knew that all too well. As I walked out of the office, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time I answered. Silence. Then a slow chuckle. You really think you can take me down? The voice was low, taunting. You're in way over your head. I didn't say a word. I just listened, letting him reveal more than he intended. You should have just let things be, he continued. Now you've made enemies. Dangerous ones. I hung up. There was no point in engaging. If they thought vague threats would scare me off, they were sorely mistaken. That night I barely slept. Every sound outside made me tense. I triple-checked the locks, the cameras, everything. But even with all the precautions, I still wasn't ready for what happened next. Around 3 a.m., a loud bang echoed through my house. I jolted upright. Another bang. Then another. Someone was pounding on my front door with force. I grabbed my phone and checked the cameras. My blood ran cold. 3 masked figures stood outside. One had a baseball bat, another was trying to tamper with my security system, and the third was holding something I couldn't quite make out. I immediately dialed 911, whispering into the phone. There are intruders at my house. Send help now. The operator stayed on the line as I moved to the safest spot in my house, gripping the nearest heavy object just in case. The pounding on the door grew louder. Then suddenly it stopped. Silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only a minute. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen. Then the sound of tires screeching. I ran back to the monitor just in time to see a black SUV speeding away. Within minutes, police sirens filled the night. Officers swarmed my property, but by then the intruders were long gone. The cops took my statement, reviewed the footage, and exchanged looks that told me what I already knew. These guys are professionals, one officer said, shaking his head. They didn't come here to scare you. They came here to send a message. I nodded, jaw tight. And I got it loud and clear. But they made a mistake. What mistake? The officer asked. I smirked, pulling out my phone and hitting play. I had audio recordings. The phone calls, the threats, everything. And if they thought I wasn't prepared to use them, they were about to be very, very wrong. This wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It was about taking down every single person who thought they could manipulate, intimidate, and control homeowners for their own benefit. And I was just getting started. But just as I thought I was gaining the upper hand, my phone buzzed with another text. A video this time. It was my house. From the inside. And the message beneath it sent a chill down my spine. We're already inside. The weight of the last message sat heavy on my chest. You don't know who you're messing with. That wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. I couldn't sit still anymore. Someone had been inside my house, someone had my keys, and the police weren't going to do a thing about it. I needed proof, something undeniable that even the most incompetent officers couldn't ignore. That meant I had to think one step ahead. So I set a trap. I spent the next few hours replacing my locks with ones that couldn't be picked. Then I installed additional security cameras, ones that weren't visible. If they came back, I'd have more than just grainy footage. I'd have solid evidence. But I wasn't just waiting for them to strike. I had a plan of my own. I called my friend at City Hall again, pushing him for more details about the HOA president's financials. The more we dug, the worse it got. There were thousands of dollars in maintenance fees, going to a non-existent contractor. Another set of funds labeled legal expenses, that had been funneled directly into a private account. It was clear now, this wasn't just mismanagement. It was full-on embezzlement. I had what I needed. Now it was time to use it. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days. I planned to expose everything right in front of the entire neighborhood. But I knew that if Peterson had any inkling of what I was about to do, he wouldn't take it lightly. He'd try to silence me first. And I wasn't wrong. That night I barely slept. Every little sound had me on edge. But then just past 3 a.m. my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I switched to my live camera feed and my blood ran cold. A figure stood at my back door dressed in all black. Unlike last time, they weren't just scoping things out. This time they had a crowbar in hand. I didn't hesitate. I dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I whispered the situation. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on the way, but I knew how that went last time. I needed to buy myself some time. Grabbing the baseball bat I kept under my bed, I crept downstairs. The intruder was still there, fumbling with the lock, oblivious to the fact that I was watching. And then, just as they were about to force their way in, the security lights burst on. The intruder froze, caught like a deer in headlights. I stepped forward so they could see me through the glass, the bat resting on my shoulder. "Wrong house," I said loud enough for them to hear. For a split second they hesitated. Then, without warning, they turned and bolted, disappearing into the night just as sirens blared in the distance. By the time the cops arrived, the intruder was long gone. But this time I had the footage. Clear, high-definition video of someone trying to break in. The police finally took me seriously. They analyzed the footage, noting that the figure moved with precision. This wasn't some random burglar. This was targeted. And then, as they enhanced the video, my suspicions were confirmed. The jacket the intruder wore had a small embroidered logo on the sleeve. The HOA's official emblem. My jaw clenched. This wasn't just about me refusing to let Karen park in my driveway. This was bigger. Someone inside the HOA was pulling the strings, and they weren't afraid to use intimidation to get what they wanted. The officers promised to investigate, but I wasn't going to wait around for their slow-moving bureaucracy to catch up. I had a plan. At the next HOA meeting, I wasn't just going to expose Peterson's fraud. I was going to take the entire corrupt board down with him. But as I locked up for the night, another thought crept into my mind, one I couldn't shake. Karen had been quiet lately. Too quiet. And that meant something big was coming. Something I might not be ready for. I stared at the papers in my hands, my pulse pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. Karen thought she had me cornered, that she had won. But what she didn't realize, what no one in the HOA realized, was that I held the ultimate trump card. I owned the entire neighborhood. Not just my house. Not just my lot. Every single property. It was all buried deep in a web of shell companies, hidden under layers of legal loopholes. I had bought up the land years ago, slowly and quietly, watching as the HOA board grew more entitled, more reckless. I had waited for the right moment to act. And now, thanks to Karen's arrogance, that moment had finally arrived. I closed the file and placed it in my briefcase just as a knock sounded at my door. Karen, along with the usual HOA board members, stood there with smug expressions, like executioners ready to deliver a final blow. "You're in violation of several HOA policies," the tall board member announced. "After careful review, we've decided your continued presence here disrupts the harmony of the neighborhood." I smirked, keeping my expression neutral. "Is that so?" Karen folded her arms, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Pack your things. You have a week to vacate the premises." I tilted my head, pretending to consider their words. Then, ever so slowly, I reached into my briefcase, pulled out the stack of ownership documents, and placed them in Karen's hands. She frowned, flipping through the papers. Confusion flickered across her face before twisting into horror. What is this?" she stammered. "The deed to this neighborhood," I said calmly. "Every house. Every lot. Every inch of it belongs to me." The board members fell silent. One of them, the woman with short gray hair, grabbed the documents and skimmed through them. Her face paled. This can't be real," she whispered. "Oh, it's very real." I leaned against the doorframe, savoring the moment. "And do you know what that means? It means I make the rules. It means your little eviction attempt is meaningless. And most importantly, it means you're all trespassing on my property." Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I stepped forward, lowering my voice just enough for her to hear. "I was willing to let things slide, Karen. I was willing to be just another neighbor. But you kept pushing. And now I push back." She stumbled back, her hands trembling as she clutched the papers. You can't do this." I chuckled. "I already did." The other board members turned on each other, whispering in frantic, hushed voices. Some of them looked like they wanted to run. Others were frozen in place, unable to comprehend how their world had just shattered. Karen, however, wasn't done yet. Desperation flickered in her eyes as she straightened her spine. "The HOA still has power. You can't just dissolve it." I smiled. "Actually, I can. And I will. Effective immediately, the HOA is dissolved. You're no longer president, Karen. None of you hold any authority here anymore." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then, as if a switch had flipped, one of the board members, Mr. Peterson, turned on Karen. "You said you had everything under control?" he hissed. I didn't know," she shot back. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "Oh, but it did," I said smoothly. "And now let me tell you what happens next. The HOA's remaining funds? I'll be using them to reimburse every homeowner you find unfairly. The ridiculous rules you put in place? Gone. And as for you, Karen?" She stiffened. "You have exactly 7 days to vacate my property." I gestured to her house. "That includes your home." Her face drained of all color. No, you can't do that." "Oh, but I can," I said, stepping back into my house. And I just did. As I shut the door in her face, I couldn't help but smile. Justice had finally been served. Or so I thought. As I turned away, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be a desperate message from Karen, or maybe a last-minute plea from one of the other board members. But when I picked it up, a single text sent a chill through me. You may own the neighborhood, but you don't own me. Attached was a live security feed from inside my house. Someone was already inside, and they were waiting for me. My grip on the phone tightened as I stared at the security feed. The grainy black and white footage showed a figure standing in my living room, completely still as if they were waiting for me. The timestamp confirmed it wasn't a past recording. This was happening in real time. I forced myself to stay calm, my mind racing through possibilities. Could it be Karen? Peterson? Some desperate HOA member trying to scare me? Or was this something far worse? I didn't have time to think. I needed to act. Reaching for the hidden compartment in my hallway closet, I pulled out my gun, checking the chamber before making my way toward the back entrance. I wasn't about to walk through the front door like an idiot and walk right into whatever trap they had planned. I kept my steps light as I approached the patio entrance. My phone vibrated again, another message. Too late. A creak sounded from inside the house. My blood turned to ice. Whoever was in my home wasn't just waiting anymore. They were moving. I switched the security feed to my hallway camera. The figure was gone. They were looking for me. I moved quickly, slipping through the back door and into the kitchen. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that made every breath feel deafening. I steadied my grip on the gun and crept forward, scanning each corner carefully. Then a voice cut through the quiet. I knew you'd come in through the back. I spun, gun raised, but the moment my eyes locked onto the intruder, my stomach dropped. Karen. But it wasn't just Karen. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood two men, both dressed in black, the same ones from my driveway. One of them smirked, holding something in his hand. My spare house key. Karen tilted her head, eyes burning with fury. You really thought this was over? I kept my gun aimed at them, my mind calculating every possible way out. Breaking into my house? That's a new low even for you. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You humiliated me. You took everything. My house. My position. My reputation. Did you really think I'd just pack up and leave? I tightened my grip. That's exactly what you should have done. She took a slow step forward, completely unbothered by the gun pointed at her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over the neighborhood to me. Every deed. Every document. Everything. Or, she gestured toward one of the men. He pulled out a knife, twirling it between his fingers. We make you disappear. I smirked. You're bluffing. She raised an eyebrow. Am I? A sudden movement. One of the men lunged. I fired. The shot rang out like a thunderclap and the man dropped, clutching his leg and howling in pain. Karen screamed, stumbling backward as the second man hesitated. That was all the opening I needed. I swung the gun toward the second man. Drop it. Now. He hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. Karen, however, was still seething, her hands shaking as she glared at me with pure venom. This isn't over, she spat. It is for you, I said coldly. The cops are already on their way. Her eyes widened. You're lying. I stepped closer, watching as her bravado cracked. You really think I wouldn't have my system send an alert the second someone entered my house? Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, the distant sound of sirens cut through the night. The second man bolted. Karen didn't. She just stood there, trembling, her entire world collapsing around her. She had lost. For good. The cops arrived within minutes. Karen was arrested on the spot, along with the injured man groaning on my floor. The other guy? He didn't make it far before the cops caught him down the street. As they hauled her away, she turned to me one last time, eyes filled with hatred. I'll get out. You know I will. I smiled. And when you do, just remember, you don't own this neighborhood. I do. She screamed something unintelligible as they shoved her into the squad car. And just like that, she was gone. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, but in the end, everything fell into place. Karen was charged with multiple felonies, including breaking and entering, conspiracy, and attempted extortion. Peterson and the rest of the HOA board vanished, their corruption exposed for the entire community to see. As for the neighborhood, I kept my promise. The HOA was permanently dissolved, the unfair fines reimbursed, and the ridiculous restrictions removed. For the first time in years, the residents could actually enjoy their homes without fear of some power-hungry board breathing down their necks. And me? I finally got some peace. One night, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over the houses I now controlled, my phone buzzed. A restricted number. I hesitated before answering. A familiar voice whispered on the other end. You may have won the battle. Click. I lowered the phone slowly, a chill creeping up my spine. Karen was gone. But something told me she wasn't finished. And neither was I.